And so just so everybody knows, welcome to the Friday Morning Book Group, our second virtual Friday Morning Book Group. So good to have you all. Thank you for joining us. Zoom allows me to record and to have a meeting for 40 minutes. So we have 40 minutes, which isn't as long as we usually do, but we'll just make the best of it. Sure. So what I'd like to do first is just give you a little background, as I usually do, about the author, and just a little bit about the book, because it's been a long time, and I know some of you may not even have the book anymore. I was not able to get a copy, believe it or not, so I am just digging through my brain for all the information that I'd like to share with you. So Doris Kearns Goodwin, she is really deemed a national treasure for her thoroughly researched biographies of political figures. And one other thing, sorry, I might ask if everybody could mute while I'm talking. That would be very helpful.
You should be able to mute all of us.
Okay, let's see. So if I go to mute.
You muted yourself.
Let's see how I mute all of you. Not sure how to do that, but.
Well, I think I can mute myself. I'm one of the ones that's not muted.
We could all mute ourselves.
Yeah, excellent. And then when you want to speak, I think the best thing is just raise your hand and then unmute, and I'll recognize you. So, okay. So Doris Kearns Goodwin, she, as I said, is deemed a national treasure for her many thoroughly researched biographies of political figures. She was born in Brooklyn, New York, the daughter of Helen Witt and Michael Francis Kearns. And her paternal grandparents were Irish immigrants. She grew up in Rockville Center, New York. She graduated from Southside High School. She attended Colby College in Maine, and she was a member of the Delta and Phi Beta Kappa, was graduated magna cum laude, 1964. And she was awarded a Woodrow Wilson Fellowship in 64 to pursue her doctoral studies. She earned a PhD in 68 in government from Harvard, and really quite a background. She taught government at Harvard for 10 years, including, of course, on the American presidency. And during this period, she assisted Lyndon Johnson in drafting his memoirs, so she had quite a close relationship with him. Her first book in 1977 was Lyndon Johnson and the American Dream, which drew upon her conversations with the late president. And it became a New York Times bestseller and provided a launching pad really for her literary career. So can everyone still see me? Because my screen changed.
Yeah, somebody says Tanya Leffman has started the screen sharing.
Oh, not sure what she did, but
can she undo whatever she just did?
Tanya, can you undo the screen sharing? Because now I can't see people. Let's see.
Is she muted? Oh, there she is.
Oh, Tanya.
Hi.
Tanya, you hit something that changed my screen. Can you put it back? You hit screen sharing. You need to click it again to undo it.
Okay, I'll do that.
Thank you.
I'm going upstairs because I had my computer there.
Well, I'll keep talking while you change that button so I can see it.
Yeah, go ahead. Keep on talking.
Okay, so leadership in turbulent times. Goodwin, as we all know, profiles 4 presidents that she has studied in depth. Lincoln, TR, FDR, and Johnson, to show how they recognized leadership qualities in themselves and were recognized as leaders by others. And she chronicles their brushes with reversals and disruptions. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we're in business.
Thank you. And Tanya, if you could hit your mute button, we're going to mute. And then if you would like to speak, you'll raise your hand and then unmute.
Okay.
Thank you. They overcame adversity and emerged with confidence to confront the issues of their times. And what struck me personally was that they were guided by a sense of moral purpose, and their goals included very much the bettering of the lives of others. And that's a biggie. Her question, does the leader make the times or do the times make the leader? It's a significant part of this discussion, I feel. And in our currently political turbulent times, I felt that this, Tanya,
Yes,
you're not muted.
I muted myself.
No, you're not muted. We can hear all the noise.
Oh, because I was walking up. I am going to sit down so you won't hear anything.
Okay, thank you. So in our turbulent times, I felt that this book was an essential read for myself, for sure, and hope that you found it equally so. I listened to the audio, which was amazing, narrated by Bo Bridges, David Morse, J.O. Sanders, and Richard Thomas. And so lots more, but I don't want to take up too much time because I said we only get 40 minutes. So why don't we move to the discussion, and as usual, everybody take a turn if you'd like to. If you don't, then absolutely fine, just to pass and to listen. So I will open the discussion to anyone who would like to speak. If you just raise your hand, I'll call on you and then you can unmute. Okay, Maureen.
Just a point of how to read the book. I found, well, I enjoyed the book tremendously, and I still haven't gotten through it. It's so dense. And I have to just keep savoring every bit of it and trying to remember it because I was a history major. But what I found is that I needed to follow one person, and skip ahead. So I would do like, and I found Franklin Roosevelt, and then Johnson, well, Abraham Lincoln, anyway, I would go ahead and follow. That was just my way of doing it because it made more sense. It was difficult to try to do the early parts of all of them, then the middle parts of all of them.
Okay, that's fine.
I don't know if anybody else did that.
I guess not, but that's okay. That sounds like a good way. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm sorry. I've forgotten your name. Who has your hand raised in the pink top, orange top?
Judy.
Judy, sorry.
Yeah. I enjoyed the book. I felt it was heavy duty reading. I could, when I read a novel that I get really wrapped up in, I can just keep going. This one I found I had to read in smaller installments so that I could absorb all of it.
Yeah.
I think, the part on Lyndon Johnson, maybe because I lived through his presidency, and I knew a fair amount about him. And also, I don't know if any of you ever saw the show All the Way, which was about how Lyndon Johnson got all the civil rights legislation passed. And I thought that was he was masterful at that.
Mm.
I think she probably had more insight into him because she had worked for him.
Sure.
But that's okay. And then the two Roosevelts, I had read a number of books about the Roosevelt family. There was a program on Channel 2 a couple of years ago, and there was a book that they recommended reading, and it was really about the two of them plus Eleanor. So a lot of that history I knew, and I had visited many years ago. I'd been to Hyde Park. I mean, we're talking, Eleanor was still alive when I went there, so that's a long time ago. But more recently, I went to Teddy Roosevelt's home in Oyster Bay.
Oh.
And I got a real sense of, what he was like. He was a hunter, so there's these giant heads, hanging in the living room, which I'm not big into hunting, so it sort of freaked me out. But he would go there in the summer, and he had, I don't remember how many children, but they would have a time in the afternoon where they would do some kind of an adventure. And that was clear to me in the book. She talked about his sense of adventure.
Right.
So anyway, I'll stop because we don't have limited time, and I'm sure somebody else wants to say something.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Judy. Appreciate it. Who would like to speak? Tanya, are you raising your hand? Oh, now you have to unmute, Tanya.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Yep.
Okay. I enjoyed that book very much because for me, that was all history, which I didn't have the background here. And I enjoyed reading about the four presidents, especially about Lincoln, with all what he achieved in his lifetime and how wonderful how he managed all the legislation and all that. To me, that was very interesting. Also, I never realized how much Johnson fought for the civil rights after Kennedy's assassination, which was really very interesting. So to me, I enjoyed that book, and mostly I enjoyed on page 218 about Lincoln, this part. So I'm not going to read it to you because we don't have time. But this part was very interesting to me.
Do you want to just read maybe one or two sentences of that?
Okay. So Lincoln had signaled that his mind was already made up before reading the proclamation, about the proclamation.
Oh, yeah.
That was about the proclamation. So this was very interesting to me, and I learned an awful lot, and I thought she was a wonderful writer, really brought the whole history in front.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to take up more time because this time is limited. So thanks so much, Debbie. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Tanya. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Joe. I think you need to unmute, Joe.
Yeah, there we go. I was up in my picture.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm a big fan of Goodwin's. I've read many of her books. As a matter of fact, I had read this book when it first came out.
Mhm.
And when I saw it reassigned, I was thrilled to be reading it again.
Good.
I love how she brings these people to life with the good parts, the bad parts. I loved the detail. I love that I had to go very slowly to absorb it. And it was like a reward. It was like dessert to me, when I would get into bed at night and read and learn about these people. I did wonder the first reading, when I first read it, because I've read so much about these presidents in her books,
Sure.
I thought, is this going to be too repetitive? And it was anything but. I mean, she says in the intro that she learned a lot, but I love how she synthesizes and thinks about these people, and most of all, brings them to life. It was a pure joy to read this book
Very
again.
well said. I totally agree. I think her writing style for nonfiction, to me, it was like reading a fiction book. It just flowed.
Mhm.
So I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Joe.
Mhm.
Anybody else like to speak? Pam.
Okay. I have not finished it, but I do love it for the same reasons that a lot of people have said, that it's very, very readable. I actually was a history major, so I love reading about history, but it's not the dense history that you read academically. And I'm only about halfway through, so lots of that information is new to me. Whereas I expect later on there'll be more public things that we all know about, but I will finish it. And also I'm listening to it, and I think I agree with you, the voices are really, really good.
Yeah. Oh, good. So you're listening and reading together.
Yes.
That's great. I often do the same thing. Yeah, that's great. That's great. I'm so glad you all have, or most of you anyway, have copies of the book. That's great. Well, thank you, Pam. Thank you so much. Tom. You need to unmute, Tom.
Toward the end of the book, it talks about Johnson in the during the civil rights stuff. And I didn't like Johnson when he was around because of this Vietnam War stuff. And so I was really surprised when I was reading through it about how positive she was. I guess I didn't really realize about the civil rights era and all the legislation that he was able to twist a lot of arms and get passed.
Texas style.
Yes, Texas style. So, you know, he was a much more mixed personality than the other ones, where he really had some bad stuff, bad traits and some very good traits. And you kind of had to wade through them. So I'm not so critical of Johnson anymore as I have been for the last 50 years.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's so interesting, Tom, because I had the exact same reaction. I said, as a matter of fact, I made notes on it. I said, most impressive to me was the magnitude of Johnson's accomplishments, like the Voting Rights Act, Medicare, tax cuts, federal aid to education, Head Start, fair housing, expansion of immigration. I mean, I was also like so caught up in Vietnam that, and I was young, you know, what did I know? And I never realized the extent of his accomplishments. So this was the biggest eye opener to me of the book. Everybody takes away a little, you know, special part, but for me, likewise. So thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
All right. Oh, Irene. You need to unmute, Irene.
Okay.
Okay.
The thing I found interesting was reading about Lincoln, because I think of Lincoln as historical figure and pictures and all of that, and she really brought him to life. Reading about his childhood and you know, his young adulthood, and I was sort of saying to my husband, I said, well, you know, I remember the name of the Lincoln Douglas debates, but I had no idea what they were really about. You know? I was not a good student. You know?
Many of us were not.
Right, and I agree with Tom about LBJ, because I you know, started that section. I said, well, I hope she's going to include the part about when he resigned. You know, he wasn't going to run for president again, and then I read it, and you know, I wasn't really aware of how much he had done for the civil rights movement, and I was impressed by that. So I too changed my mind.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you, Irene. Bill.
I invited my husband to join in because I have one of the hard copy books from the library, and I said, you have to read this, because he's also a fan of Goodwin's.
Oh,
so
excellent. Well, I thank you. Thank you for joining, Bill. I hope you continue to stay with us. Hope you like it.
As long as you have books like this, I'll be here.
Excellent.
This is great. I have been a student of leadership for a long time, and was just fascinated being able to focus on the leadership characteristics of all four men. But what, just picking up on some of the most recent comments, I was particularly fascinated with Johnson and with the civil rights, with how inclusive he was, bringing people together, and how he just over time brought such a disparate group of people together, and what he did to effectively execute that strategy. But in contrast, the exclusionary style that he showed during the Vietnam era, that he really isolated himself with the old hawks that he did not reach out to any dissenting views, and he isolated himself, and we all know what the result was.
Sure.
And, you know, there are parallels that I won't go into, but that was, to me, just the most fascinating contrast within the book.
So Bill, may I ask you, so you are a student of leadership. Do you have any thoughts about why he isolated himself in that way?
Oh, that's a very good question. And I'd love to hear because most of us on the call, you know, lived through that period.
Sure.
I don't know why he did, but many of the others were really students of leadership and of history and understood what it took. I think Johnson was very successful with the civil rights because it really tied in with all of his experience and his background and his length of time in Washington, that he understood the political forces in order to get things executed.
Sure.
But I don't think he had the overview and the ability. The civil rights was all within Congress. The Vietnam War was not within Congress. It was in the public realm and with the military, and he just wasn't able to coalesce the people to deal with it appropriately or adequately.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. Well, that's I so appreciate your insights, and thank you so much for joining us.
Oh,
Can I add one thing
Of
that
course.
people seem to be very interested in Lyndon Johnson, and I'm not sure how many people are aware of Robert Caro's books.
Yes.
These at least 3 books that he wrote on Johnson. Each one is about 800 pages, so it's dense. Once again, terrific reading. I've started to reread them because I love his style. I wanted something long during this time to get my teeth into, and it's wonderful. So you can check Robert Caro, C-A-R-O.
Yes, I'm very aware of it. I've never read them, and they're on my list of to do in my lifetime.
Worth it.
Someday. Thank you. Well, thank you for the recommendation. Who haven't we heard from? Isabel, did you want to speak? Or Kevin? Kevin, I see. Kevin, why don't you unmute?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I enjoyed the book. I like this shared similarities of the presidents, like storytelling and this thirst for knowledge.
Yeah.
I was also impressed by Lincoln's compassion for animals, like when he saw a sheep or a goat caught on a barbed wire or something.
Yeah.
He went all the way back to untangle it. I thought that was kind of cool, how he was so compassionate. I was surprised that the book didn't mention the affair that FDR had with Lucy Mercer. Eleanor threatened to cut off all money to him and take Springwood Estate and Hyde Park from FDR if he didn't discontinue his affair with Lucy Mercer. So they kind of glossed over that part, but I did like the book. At times I thought it was a bit dry. It was kind of, I don't know, kind of dragged on in a few spots, but I learned a lot from it. And also I wanted to mention that Goodwin actually, one of her books was the basis for the Lincoln movie. So I thought that was interesting too, because I saw the Lincoln movie, but I didn't know Goodwin actually had the basis of the book for the movie. So That's all I have to say.
Well,
Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. Yeah, she had written that about Lincoln, quite a bit about Lincoln. But I'd like to say, I guess many of you may know that she wrote about Eleanor and Franklin in the book, I think it's an unfinished.
No Ordinary Time.
No, thank you, Pam. No Ordinary Time. And as a matter of fact, I should remember it because I just finished listening to it. I just couldn't remember the name, but that really delves into FDR's personal life. It's very fascinating, and a lot about his affairs and his extracurricular activities. So if anybody's interested in that, it's an excellent book, also by Goodwin. Okay, so we haven't heard from Isabel. Would you like to speak?
I didn't finish the book. I read the first section, but I think if I go back to it, because I do have it in the house, I would do what I think it's Maureen suggested, and that is read one person through all the different phases.
Yeah.
The continuity of that, I think, would entice me to read it more.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's, if it works for you, why not? Yeah, I mean, it can be, I suppose, a little bit jumpy. So concentrating on one at a time is probably a fine idea. Yeah. So great. Unless there are any other comments, we have a few more minutes. Oh, Irene. Maureen, sorry. Maureen, my mistake. Sorry. You need to unmute, Maureen.
Okay. Yeah, I that was my first comment. I probably shouldn't jump in. I appreciate what everybody has said, and I agree with probably every single comment that everybody has made, that, you know, in terms of the book. What I am thinking about is what's not in the book, and that is the leadership. This is like white man's privilege on steroids. And what it's just kept jumping out to me, like with Theodore Roosevelt and Teddy Roosevelt, they would be nowhere if they were female. Nowhere. And they were given their positions because of their social capital, their wealth, and their whiteness and their maleness.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not criticizing the book. It's just like it jumped out at me so strongly that you know, the leadership in our country is so skewed to white males.
Yes, it is, and we are making a stab at making changes in that, which is very important. I would like to bring out that Abe Lincoln and Lyndon Johnson did not come from privileged backgrounds.
Right. Okay.
So half of them did and half of them didn't.
Okay.
But there is absolutely, in my mind, your privilege and your upbringing and your wealth and your family, if you have all that, it certainly aids you, and can't hurt. So you're right. Yes, Judy.
As I was reading this, I was thinking to myself, how would these 4 presidents have handled the situation that we're dealing with in this country right now? And we have someone who is exercising no leadership.
Correct.
And I just thought to myself, clearly, I mean, Roosevelt and Lyndon Johnson clearly would have been on top of the whole thing.
Exactly.
Probably the other 2 as well.
Yeah, I have to say, as I was reading, not as I was reviewing the book for this discussion, I thought about that too also, and I thought now is when we could use FDR. In my mind, we could use FDR, and it's just it's just a difficult situation, and we have to just do our best to make changes. That's
yeah. And the other thing that I noticed about really all 4 of them, they made an attempt to surround themselves with some people who didn't necessarily have the same opinions as the president did.
correct.
And they were all masterful at coming to consensus with their cabinet or whatever the group of people was that they needed to bring together.
Right. That's great. Well, I'd love to talk more. Unfortunately, they're going to cut me out at 40 minutes. That's what Zoom does. So I would like to say, if you guys would like to meet again, I was looking for a book that everyone could get digitally. So I looked on Hoopla, where it's always available, audiobooks and ebooks. And the title I found, which is an old classic, but maybe you'd be in favor, is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. Would folks just raise a hand if you think you'd be interested in reading and discussing it? If not, no worries. Yeah. Oh, okay. Looks like enough people. I'll throw it out to you. Do you have a title? Does anyone have a title? It would need to be something that we could obviously all get digitally. If you all have a suggestion, you can send it to me, or you can tell me now, and I can look and see if if that would be readily available to all of us. So perhaps you can, if you don't obviously have something on the top of your heads, you can send me suggestions, and we'll go from there. But what I'll try to do is get back to you, and then maybe plan a third meeting, maybe in a couple of weeks. How does that sound?
Great.
Good? Okay. All right. Well, it's been wonderful to see all of you. I hope you all stay safe and stay well. And I look forward to seeing you.
Thank
again.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deb.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Such a good choice of a book.
Well, everybody.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so
Such
much.
a great book.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.